and has written extensively on the 9-star situation. I found his articles factual, unbiased, and helpful in all of my research and everything I've done. Charlie will give us some background. Tricia Judge with, I'll get it right, the International Imaging Technology Council. I tried to make it an association, but it just didn't work. Tricia is the executive director as well as an attorney and their general counsel, and Tricia has helped many of us when this 9-star issue came up. Originally, this portion of the program was going to be a look back at all the things that had happened in my career for 40 years, but we supplemented with this. Mike Marissa, you need it. I didn't say Mourinho and Oscar Sanchez, each are presidents and CEOs of their companies, Sharp, Konica, and Kyocera, and they're each very much involved in what's happening in the 9-star situation, which came about on June 9th. None of us had any warning, none of us had any indication, none of us knew what was about to transpire, that the United States government would look at 9-star and say that they are involved in unfair slave activities in terms of the labor and the production of their products, and set up an embargo against all of their products coming into the United States, 9-star and 8 of its subsidiaries. So we have invited today to share with us on the platform, we invited Lexmark, and we bought Lexmark, which has 68% ownership by 9-star. We want to come and explain their position and share with us their views. Lexmark declined. Bob, thank you very much for reaching out to Alan on this opportunity. We're unable to participate in the panel discussion, but appreciate the invitation. So we did invite Lexmark to participate in the decline. We also invited 9-star to participate. I have never gotten a definitive answer. I got a "we'll consider it." 9-star invited participate. They acknowledged the invitation, and they have not, they're not here. Okay, they have not appeared. Lexmark's written a letter. I've seen this same letter to, it has different dates, but it's the same content. Lexmark has come out and said unequivocally they're against any slave labor practices. They support the government in terms of the laws and the regulations, and they are re-evaluating their sources and the equipment they're bringing into the United States. Lexmark, they were blindsided just as well as everyone else in our industry. I have a deep concern for Lexmark dealers. Many of you represent Lexmark and have done an excellent job with excellent products and service and support, and you're in the middle of this situation, and we will try to get the answers and give you direction. Slave labor. That 5, I changed it for you, Tricia. My research indicated there was perhaps 100,000 people involved with slave labor in this dispute. Tricia came back and said, no, Bob, it's 5.7 million individuals that are involved. What is going on in China? What is happening? What is the genesis of the problem? Well, very simply, there is a large or minor Muslim population in the People's Republic of China, and the Chinese government does not recognize or believe that their religious beliefs should be pursued and are appropriate in China. So what they've done is institute a program of re-education, poverty alleviation, giving them mandatory work assignments, and political indoctrination. These people basically are put into camps and have those things taken care of. They are working for companies that receive subsidies from the Chinese government. Their mobility, their beliefs, they're all being challenged. Religious discussions and disputes have gone on worldwide. This is another one, but that's basically what we come down to in this situation. If you think it's just our products, you're wrong. There are 22 companies on the list of embargoed products that can come into the United States. And I've listed artificial flowers, bricks, Christmas decorations, coal, cotton, electronics, fireworks, fish, footwear, garments, gloves, hair products, nails, polycyclone, textiles, thread yarn, tomato products, and toys have all in some fashion been embargoed from coming from China due to the Muslim population that are producing them under slave labor conditions, according to the United States. On June 9th, we added 9-star. If you look, this is taken right off of the 9-star website. If you go and Google 9-star, the corporation comes up, and this, we'll make the slides available to everyone. You don't take pictures, unless you want one of me. Happy to oblige. That's part of my paw, not the he part, okay? But if you look at the group organizational chart, you see quite unequivocally what they present as their corporate structure. You have printers, you have Phantom, and you have Lexmark. And as we all know, several of the Lexmark products are patent products that are related, that are there. If you look under consumables, you see Static Control, 100% owned by 9-star. Now, what is the effect of the ownership on these entities is a real question that is somewhat at this point unresolved. Lexmark is resourcing. They stated they would not get any additional products from 9-star, and Static Control doing the same, trying to refocus. But those things are playing out. We don't have answers yet. And then in terms of circuits, 9-star is one of the top producers of chips in the world. Many of our secondary market rechargers and toner manufacturers here in the United States relied on 9-star chips. I spoke with Clover. They've re-sourced their product. And in fact, Jim told me they were saving about 50% in that effort to do that. But this is the 9-star organizational chart. I didn't make that up. As I said, in terms of the BTA position, you know, if a child gets in trouble with the law, it doesn't mean the parent is guilty or vice versa. So we have some due process issues to consider there as well. Here are the prohibited companies. You've seen all the lists. I've searched for the brand names. One of my friends here says there's 52 or 56, and maybe we can squeeze some more out. But you know, that's a difficult situation. You don't want to name someone a brand name as being part of 9-star without unequivocal evidence that in fact it is. But Lamero, My Cartridge, Zipprint, G&G, and perhaps 52 more soft toner companies or toner brands are affected by this embargo. So the law, the Forced Labor Prevention Act, enforced by the Department of Homeland Security, the tariff law of 30, it's up there. All work or service was extracted from any person under the menace of any penalty for its non-performance and for which worker does not offer himself voluntarily. Okay, that's pretty much sums up slave labor. Now, there's a rebuttable presumption. Now, let's look at that from a simple legal definition. Each of you that registered to attend this session, to come to the BTA National Convention meeting here in Boston, Massachusetts, there's a presumption that you are a professional, that you're ethical, that you're honest, that you're a good person, non-disruptive, all of those things. Now that presumption is rebuttable. As we go through the next 2 days, we'll see if you meet those standards. So there is a standard, it is there, and it is, though, however, rebuttable. And in this situation, when we go to the reaction, you will see, so that one, 9-stars reacted, Lexmark and Static Control reacted. The United States House of Representatives, there's been a bill entered that any public company will have to disclose any products that they offer that are origin in China. It's just in the House right now. Will it get bipartisan support? Will it get enacted, that's a question for us all to follow. But this has additional ramifications once the 9-star situation came about. So the House is looking at that. There's universal industry condemnation. None of us support slave labor. None of us want to work with a company that would be involved with slave labor. No one has come out and said anything different, and there won't be anything different. It is wrong, it is illegal, and it should be addressed immediately. MDL Products has brought a lawsuit based on it. BTA has taken a firm position, and I'll show you that in a second. The International Imaging Technology Council, Tricia has sent out a letter. She's offered her services to anyone who needs any guidance or furtherance. BTA does the same through the BTA legal channel. If you have any questions, either one of us are available to you, and we're glad to do that to help you through these issues and these matters. The 9-Star Challenge, you all heard about it. I learned about it last week. Sort of like the Miracle Team, the Patriot Act. We went across the upper Midwest raising money for the Jillian Fund and respecting veterans, and some of my hockey players are here in the audience too, and our brothers. It's wonderful. But this came out last Wednesday, as I recall. 9-Star has filed suit in the Court of International Trade, and they're saying, yes, there is that presumption, but we want to present you with facts and information that will rebut that presumption. Whether or not the International Court will agree with 9-Star or agree with the U.S. government, I think all we can do is sit back and basically watch to see what happens during that. Now, interestingly enough, if you read the complaint, which I'm not asking you to do, I'd like to do that. That's good reading. But paragraph 56 of the complaint filed before the International Trade Court has this provision. It says that because of the listing decision, which is the embargo that was put in place by Homeland Security, several American printing industry trade associations have cut off their relationship with claimants, which is 9-Star. And they footnoted Business Technology Association, 9-Star, Lexmark, and the Business Technology Association. And they basically have put as a footnote our position that BTA took, that 9-Star is engaged in activities that are detrimental to the industry and should not be part of the Business Technology Association. So it's part of the complaint. They're showing we have suffered irreparable harm for many, the embargo in and of itself, and a further indication is action such has been taken by BTA. Here's Tricia's letter offering their support and their position in regard to the 9-Star embargo and the help and what they're willing to do to help you along the way. So let's have a discussion. Charlie, I want to start with you because you're macro, down to micro. You've had an overlook on this. Can you fill in the gaps that I misstated or missed and give us sort of the overview from your perspective? I'd appreciate that.
Sure. You didn't misstate anything. I think that was a really good overview. When we learned about this, it was the first time that we'd ever heard of any suggestion at all that forced labor was being used by any of the Chinese vendors. I mean, this really came out of nowhere. We found out on a Friday, and the embargo went into place on Monday, so that was Friday, June 9th, and the embargo went in on June 12th. And then we read as much as we could about the UFLPA, which is the rule that 9-Star is alleged to have violated. That's the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, which was an act that got put in place in 2022. And that says that there is this rebuttable presumption that anybody that is placed on the UFLPA entities list is using slave labor or using forced labor to produce their products. And that's essentially what happened with 9-Star and 8 of its subsidiaries. Just like in a nutshell, The subsidiaries range from hardware manufacturers to actual consultancies. Some of them do business in the United States, and some of them, NiStar says, doesn't. And there was one company that was put on a list, BTA International, which makes cartridge components, which is not a subsidiary of NiStar, at least that's what NiStar says. We fast forward to last week, the lawsuit that Bob mentioned. What NiStar is challenging is not so much that they have engaged in slave labor or forced labor. They're saying that the rule that the UFLPA and rebuttal presumption run afoul of the Administrative Protective Act of 1940 something. But that act is what companies, it determines what's fair in the administration of the law. And, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a market analyst, so all this stuff gets very nuanced. So I'll leave it up to the legal eagles to fill us in on that. But really what they're saying is that the rebuttal presumption is, it really has no basis, that there has to be some proof. And they've never been given any proof at all. NiStar says it was never notified, it had absolutely no idea that they were going to be banned, and they're challenging that. One thing that I thought was very interesting in their filing is they don't really say that they don't engage in forced labor. They really are standing on the law and the process and the way that it was administered. So, and then the other thing I guess I should say is all the brands, I mean, the impact of the embargo to date, I looked at stuff this morning before we came, I'm not seeing much impact at all when it comes to, channels like Amazon. There are, dozens and dozens of NiStar brands that are still available. I'm not seeing any stockouts. Likewise, if you look on Walmart, Walmart has over 1,000 SKUs that are Anthem. That's the printers that NiStar makes. So it really doesn't seem like there's been much impact on the market in the United States. And I've also spoken with some wholesalers, some of them that you probably do business with, and they say that inventory levels are just fine. So somehow the stuff continues to come in.
Thank you, Charlie. Have you all experienced any supply chain difficulties or issues?
Right now, as you guys got sat down, I'm dealing with a Lexmark situation and some pretty serious back orders, and they say they're going to try to help me out. Literally, 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ironic, so
maybe a step down or so, there are some issues
this is from the big, distributors, so.
We have vendors.
It's the supply. I dig it. I buy a lot of it.
I put some A4 slides up there for y'all to look at. There are plenty of them. Tricia, the International Imaging Technology Council has been an advocate for remanufacturers for years. What's your spin on this, and how are you looking at it, and what advice do you have for our audience?
Well, the council represents toner cartridge and inkjet cartridge remanufacturers in North America. And of course, we've taken a direct hit competitively from NiStar, because NiStar's products are cheaper in every sense of the word, and they are, and now we know why, because they are made by slave labor. I have a list in my booth, which is, thank you BTA, putting me right by the stage, of all of the imports that have been allowed through, chiefly because NiStar has invested heavily in real estate in Hong Kong, so they are bringing in the products through Hong Kong. And if you want to check and see if your provider is flouting the rules, I would be more than happy to share that list with you, because they are. And what I think is very critical for you to understand is that it is not NiStar that is going to be punished if you are caught. It is the importer. And under 18 U.S.C. subsection 545, you can go to prison for up to 20 years. And God knows how big the fines are. So I implore you to come talk to me, check out your sources, and make sure that you move your supply to a legitimate cartridge provider that is not engaged in this type of activity.
So Tricia, you stated that the distributor is someone who brings it in or reselling. So how does that go down to the dealer? They buy from a distributor and then they resell to an end user or bundle it in a package?
It's my understanding that it is the importer that is in harm's way. And a dealer that buys with no knowledge, that's yet to be seen. But it's almost impossible to have no knowledge at this point because this ban is so clearly out there. And it's the subject of dozens of press stories. It's on everybody's lips. My phone's been ringing off the hook for the past, since June 9th. But I deeply encourage you to look at perhaps remanufactured cartridge alternative. Obviously, it's good for the environment. It's North American. It's apple pie Americana, and it's safe. Why would you put your business and your freedom on the line for a couple of bucks margin savings to import 9-star products? And besides, this is a human rights violation. These are not nice people. And as Charlie said, in their filing, in their complaint, they're not really saying we didn't do it. They're saying, or that we don't do it. They're saying we think that the law is wrong, and they're questioning that. So I keep coming back to the fact that it's just a smart business practice to not say, well, we'll wait and see. Don't wait and see. Come talk to me, find out what you're sourcing, and then let's talk about alternatives, because you don't want to get your hand caught in this cookie jar. It's just too dangerous. Plus, Congressman Morelli, Congressman Wexham, a group of congressional people are looking at tightening and toughening this particular act, the Uyghur Acts, and expanding it to areas that were normally protected, like Amazon continues to sell these products, and you have 56 of them according to my count. And those products, if they take away the e-commerce platform protection of Section 203, they could end up being, in serious hot water. So do not source products off of Amazon, or avoid these products like the plague. And I think you wanted me to try and reveal some of those additional names.
I would be very, very appreciative if you would.
Okay.
I will take your slide and put it up there. And let me tell you, the law says that you have to do certain due diligence to assure that you're not engaged in these activities. And so there is a burden on you to make certain that you're not marketing these, including these in some of your CPC contracts. So Tricia has a list here. You've got some names you want to share with us?
I do, and just so you know, Eric Choi, who's the Chief Enforcement Officer for Customs and Border Patrol, says the burden is on you guys. If you are importing these products, it is you who have the burden to prove that you've done your due diligence and that you're not sourcing for a 9-star or a related subsidiary. Let me just explain why I can't put up a slide, and you know this better than anybody, Bob, but let's take LD Products, for example. LD Products is a manufacturer in California that we know imports heavily from 9-star and sells on e-commerce sites. Well, LD Products does also remanufacture some cartridges. So if I slap, LD Products with the Scarlet A, they could come back at my little nonprofit and say, hey, this is slander or whatever they want to call it, and sue me. And I just assume not to be sued, if that's all the same to you guys. And so I will name some of these names because we know they're affiliated with 9-star, but understand that they may also have some legitimate products. But I would avoid these products anyway until everything is sort of sorted out. G&G, GPC Image, High Page, Inkney, Kingjet, Kingway, Lamero, any of the Lameros, My Cartridge Forever, My Cartridge Superior, Suprint, My Toner, Pro Office Tech, Super Image, Zip Print, Uniwork, and then there are also some subsidiary brands, like Charlie mentioned, Walgreens, Wexford products are all Nightstar. Walmart is continuing to sell mainly Nightstar products. Myers in Michigan is sourcing from Green Project, which is a Nightstar distributor. Vivid Color, CMT Top, Elevate, Jarbo, LD Products, as I mentioned, Office World, Jamigo, Bochet, Cogain, Wellpop, Kingjet, Kingway, E-Jet, Value Toner, and Xerox Everyday. I mean, these are all products that were originally they're coming from Nightstar. So if you want a complete list, or if you want to, again, I invite you to my booth. I have the 56 names. You give me a name and I'll happily, check it out for you. If you want to take a look at the list, I invite you to do that. I just have to be, we lawyers are pretty funny about being, not wanting to invite any unnecessary litigation. Much though I've loved my 5 trips to the U.S. Supreme Court, I really don't need to go back. So.
Well, if you do, I know some lawyers will take you. It's not a joking matter because you are under the microscope. I'm sure Tricia and I and Charlie and others have spoken to the task force and asked about specific products and specific liability and exposure. Although I don't see them targeting you now at this point, there is a time that they may make an example to make sure that the Nightstar products cannot be circumvented and brought into the United States and resold. I've convinced them that we're innocent, we're just here trying to make a living. But as we all know with our CPC contracts, you try to get it as low as you can in terms of your costs so that your return will be better. But you should be looking at this list, avoiding these products. And as Charlie said earlier, under the Administrative Procedure Act, that's the challenge Nightstar has made. And that's basically a due process argument. They're basically saying, you've said that we're guilty, why? You give us no reason, no basis, no anything else. So the law itself does have some questionable provisions in it, and it will be challenged, and this litigation will go on and on. But in the meantime, even if they meet their burden on the Administrative Procedure Act and show that due process wasn't given and they weren't given the proper right to come in and defend themselves, even if that's happening, the government can come back and say, here, we'll show you now, not in compliance with the Administrative Procedure Act, that you are guilty. And believe me, when I speak to the task force, when I've spoken to these individuals, they unequivocally say that it's slave labor that's manufacturing this product. We don't take this action. It's double, tripled, quadruple checked. Treasury's involved, Department of State's involved, every department's involved to look at it and make sure that we're right and we're not jumping off a ledge.
Can I just,
yes,
real quick, so there was one of the original companies, so the law went into effect last June. There was a company that was already in a little bit of hot water with them for cotton products that was in jail. And they were alleged to have used illegal forced labor. Anyway, they challenged that. The Court of International Trade, the suit was filed in 2021, and they lost. So, and they were going after the APA. They said they weren't given due diligence. So, I don't know how strong Nightstar's case is, but we just found out about that yesterday, so let me share it.
Nightstar had no alternative but to file a suit. Let's get to some real everyday issues. Our OEM manufacturers are here. Thank you all for being here. Let's back up a little bit. After COVID and chip shortages and everything we went through, we had supply chain problems back then. Oscar, starting, has Kyocera overcome those supply chain problems? You have product flowing through the market, getting to the dealers?
Thank you all, and thank you, the BTA, for having me this roundtable. Yes, I can say that for Kyocera we have overcome that problem. So right now, the supply chain issue that we had with the limitation of production because of the shortage of chips is totally solved in our case. So we can say that difficult crisis is over. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that we don't have back orders, because that's the normal course of business that we had before the supply chain crisis, and we always have, because you can have higher demand than expected, or you can make a wrong forecast from our side. So we can occasionally have some back orders that are solved very quickly, and again, that's something that happened before the supply chain crisis, and it will always happen. But the production problems that we had in the last 18 months are completely overcome, and we're happy to say that we're over with that problem, and we're waiting for the next one.
And Sam, Conoco really get, 2 fires and 2 toner manufacturing facilities in addition to all the other problems. How are you faring today?
Yeah, good. So, good morning, everyone. So we are back in business. No back orders for our hardware. We were actually all caught up by December, January of this past year. All of our direct orders are filled. All of our dealer orders are filled, so business as usual.
That's wonderful. And Mike, you never had ship problems.
I just have to do this. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't have a shortage. We're doing well, and we have obviously we'll get to the 9-star products as we do. As many truck dealers know, we had an OEM relationship on some of our printers, so those obviously are on back order. We stopped that, but the rest of our products are fully available. We just had our best quarter in our company's history last quarter, so we seem to be trucking along quite well. Hopefully, it continues. I will say that I think, speaking for all 3 of us, we're all new to our jobs. This was a great job 5-10 years ago. Since then, we've had a global pandemic. People don't want to return to the office. Now we're talking about this topic, so it's certainly been an interesting couple of years.
If I could just add something, Sharp, to your credit, was one of the companies who had a shipment on the water when the ban went into effect, and you refused it. You sent it back, and I think that is wonderful. You should be applauded for that.
What we missed is 2 days earlier we announced the launch of that product. And that was quite embarrassing when it came out. But yes, we did. We immediately stopped on order. We said we refuse this when it comes to port. So you might as well hurry.
Mike, if it's not confidential, you brought up your A4 relationship with 9-Star and Lexmark. What are you doing to overcome that now to get product back into the stream?
Yeah, so I can't get into all the specifics that we're having discussions, but obviously all those products have been stopped. We don't sell them. If you're a truck dealer, I'll take this opportunity to apologize. You're on back order, and we understand. I think everyone understands why. No one objects to it. It doesn't change the complexity of the issue for the dealer. So all those products have been stopped. We do have dialogue with Lexmark. I'm a believer in the fact that I can stop my feet from the outside, or I can try to affect change from the inside. And we're going to see if we can affect change. If we can't, then we can't, and we move forward. Sharp is developing our own A4 line. We just introduced a couple of them. We continue to introduce, so we have a robust roadmap for A4 self-developed. So I don't think long-term we have a big issue.
And you're not alone. Sam, you have components that came from 9-Star, perhaps, parts, chips, whatever. Have you had to readjust and remarket?
Yeah, so after the Homeland Security blocked the imports of goods made by 9-Star, we worked with Lexmark, identified those products being sold to Conoco, and then put actions in place to either source products differently or move them to Lexmark's Mexican operation.
And that raises problems and questions as well. Where are the Mexican operations getting their parts? So we still have to watch and look at that. Mark, if you can get Dex to buy Lexmark, we can eliminate this whole problem, okay? Ask the Doyles if they'll do that. Oscar, do you have components or chips or parts coming in from China?
Yes, of course. I mean, you cannot avoid bringing products from China. The good situation for us is that after the last round of tariffs for Chinese imports in 2019, at that time we decided to move the vast majority of our production to Vietnam. That's where we had our factory. We doubled the capacity of that factory. And right now, probably around 90% of the copiers and printers that we sell in the US come from Vietnam and not from China. That doesn't mean that we don't have, of course, components that come from China. You cannot avoid that. Our factory in China is in Dongguan City, which is 3,000 miles southeast of Xinjiang province. That's where this problem with the Uyghur minority is happening. So we believe that we are kind of far away from the problem. Of course, we have our human rights policy. We oblige our suppliers to comply with that policy, and that specifically prohibit the use of forced labor and child labor in our supply chain. We are part of the Responsible Business Alliance, and that's probably the largest world group of companies that are committed to social responsibility in the supply chain. And we have audits every year in our factories that we comply with human rights regulation. And recently had the audit in the factory in Vietnam. We had the gold certification. So that means that we believe that we have really a good situation in that sense. And I think that's something quite unique with Kyocera. That probably we are the only OEM that we manufacture 100% of our copiers and printers, and the toner for those copiers and printers. So we don't outsource products from any other company. So we control 100% our production, and we believe that in that case we will not be affected by this situation.
That's wonderful, great. And the human rights aspect, all these companies and all of you recognize them and support them as well, regardless of the association or that you're involved with. Do we have any idea what percentage of A4 is going to be affected by this in the world, or in at least the U.S. market? Does anyone have a guess? I didn't have any numbers on that.
Well, I can tell you that last year, Pantun, in the 4 mono market segment, they have a 5.2% market share in the US. That's a significant market share. And they increased very quickly in 2 years. Of course, they use probably not this channel, they use different channels, but that's a significant number of units in the US market.
Absolutely. And I know in each of your dealer contracts, you have requirements that dealers comply with all laws and regulations. Usually it's reciprocal. It says the parties agree to abide by all laws and regulations. So that's another burden on you in terms of your due diligence and making sure you're in compliance. As you've seen from both Sharp and Konica and Kyocera, they're taking active steps in their due diligence to make sure they're in compliance. They have alternative supply chains and sources, and you need to do that as well. I don't see them terminating you if you get caught, with an unsuspected thing, but you should be following that and make sure that you're following your due diligence requirements as well. I don't know if we know the answer to this. Are there other Chinese suppliers that we should be concerned with, Tricia? Do you know, or Charlie?
I think we should be concerned with all of the Chinese suppliers because so many of these companies are have heavy investments from the People's Republic of China. They get underwritten heavily by the government, and 9 Star's campus that they opened about, I guess it was like 2016, 2017, takes up 90 football fields. These are huge operations, and I would certainly question, if they're getting the investment money from the government, then there's a very strong possibility that the Uyghur population may be being pressed into service in their factories. So I think it's wise, and obviously I'm advocating for you to buy from legitimate remanufacturers, I many of these Chinese companies have some really jaded pasts. I believe, I think Astor had some folks go to jail, if I'm not mistaken. So I would be very sensitive to what you're purchasing from China. And I know there's a price differential, but again, you know, a few bucks for versus doing the right thing, you know. So you have to make a better argument for your products on something other than price. But it's worth it to stop slave labor.
That price to insulate yourself and protect yourself is worth it. Charlie, do you have any other Chinese manufacturers you may be concerned about?
I think that, you know, a couple things just to add on. I do think there should be some concern about, you know, the use of forced labor for many of the Chinese companies. And this is not just Uyghurs, and this is not just in Xinjiang province. The Chinese have a policy of sinification, which is what they want to do is take certain minority groups that are in provinces like Xinjiang and move them out and allow Han-Chinese to move into the province where they may not have representation. And so it's not just with the Uyghurs. There are other Muslim groups. There are, you know, people have been talking about Tibet forever, you know, Mongolians. I mean, there are all kinds of different groups that can be involved. And again, the process is that you start what they call a poverty alleviation program. Nine Stars is very outspoken about their poverty alleviation programs. And a lot of times this will, you know, include some kind of education. And you train people in their province, and then when they get to a certain age, they move them out and put them, you know, in factories. I'm sure it's not just in our industry, I'm sure it's in all industries. But I think this is a really widespread practice in China. It's been followed in, you know, publications like The Economist and in Financial Times. If you look at the UNHCR, some of their publications, it's really well documented. So it does make sense if you have suppliers, you know, to ask a lot of questions. If you see anything in the financials about poverty alleviation, that should be a red flag.
And you should be prepared for the answers, because there's jurisdictions that are now forbidding you to bid certain products on their requests for proposals. The state of Georgia's taken a position, there's others that will follow, and you must be aware of that.